Hello and welcome to the Draft 2 Digital Spotlight. This is Mark Lefebvre and I'm your host for today. And I am honored to have with me in the virtual studio, Richard H. Stevens. Richard, welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
So I can't help but comment on this because I love what you're wearing. And for anyone who's only listening to this in audio, Richard is wearing, you look like a knight, basically.
Yes. It's my knight's costume I wear when I do book shows or anything that has anything to do with my books.
Okay. And is that, now I believe this is something that you wear at different events. Is that true?
That's correct. If I'm doing Comic-Cons or anything book related that has themes to it, like fantasy medieval fairs and stuff like that, I'll dress up in costume. It just kind of helps add to the mood when I'm trying to peddle my wares, as opposed to just me standing there smiling at people.
Cool. And I'm going to want to get into that a lot because I've seen you in action at various different events. But I want to go back for people who are not familiar with the epic fantasy author Richard H. Stevens. Tell us a little bit about what you write.
I write basically epic fantasy. I started when I was 17. I wrote this great all-encompassing epic fantasy, and it took me 35 years to write it. And it's never had dragons in it. And as I got into my early 50s, I found out that, I was supposed to write to market and all that stuff. And I didn't want to write to market. I wanted to write what I wanted to write. But something happened to one of my characters that just totally threw the ending of the story out. I had the story in my head for 35 years. And halfway through book 3, this character did something totally off the wall and it killed my ending. And I had to come up with a new ending. So the dragon was introduced into the story. And once I introduced the dragon in my story, right away, 13 more books came into my head because now I had to explain to the reader why there was no mention of the dragon for 2.5 books. So for 1,000 pages, no mention of the dragon. All of a sudden, here's a dragon. So that inspired Rika's Flight, which is my next series, and it explains why the dragons are no longer prevalent in the series.
Oh, wow. So I want to go back to that. So 35 years you were working on that first book.
Yeah, I started when I was 17. I left school at 17 to have my first child. And I worked in a bakery for 22 years. And then I figured, well, I can, nothing wrong with bakery workers, stuff like that, but I wanted to do something a little bit more rewarding and a little bit more pay and better benefits. So I went back to school, got my grade 12 when I was about 37. And I joined the local police force, and I did that for 12 years. So I had 5 kids in the interim, 2 careers, and my writing was just, something that got put on the side. And with the help of my wife, Caroline, she now supports me, so I could retire from the stressful job with the police service and start writing, which is turning my hobby into my fantasy, I guess.
So when did you start writing full-time?
Started writing full-time about 3 years ago.
Okay.
And
all right.
I ever wrote before that, working in the police service, I was so stressed out at the end of the day that I couldn't do anything. So I couldn't write. I just, try and spend time with the kids. But the only writing I would get done would be the hour paid lunch or unpaid lunch. Actually, I'm a special constable. I wasn't a regular constable. And so I'd take an hour lunch while I was on shift, and it would help me take my mind away from the job I was doing. And that was the only time I got to write. But my wife and I realized that the stress was probably going to end my life earlier than later. So we decided, I need to leave there. So I retired from the police service, and now she supports me, and I'm trying to support her. I'm not quite there yet, but it's coming.
On its way, right?
That's our goal, is for me, to turn everything around and start making enough money that she can retire from what she's doing.
That is cool. I want to go back now to the 35 years, because you had this book in your head. You carried it with you, with the story, the characters, everything, for decades. And then the dragon showed up. The character did something different. It was almost like that was the impetus for all the other books that have come to mind and written, right? Was there any trigger for that, or was it just like the muse just tapped you on the shoulder at one point in time? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I'm a discovery writer or a pantser. I'm not a plotter. I just don't like taking the time to plan anything out. I like to kick the character in the butt out the door, and we discover the world and all the trials and tribulations to go through. I discover it through their eyes. So when I'm writing a book, it's almost like I'm reading a book. So I have no idea what's going to go on. I generally know the ending, and I did know the ending of this book until the character did something catastrophic. But yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm answering that question properly, but the trigger, there was no trigger for it. It just happened. It just I was at one scene, and it just seemed like the right thing to do to have this character do that. And but thinking it forward, all of a sudden I wrote that scene and looked at the screen and now what? Everything that I planned for 35 years is right out the window because that character was integral to the end.
Right.
Something happened that he wouldn't be involved in it.
Oh, that is fascinating. I'm looking at sort of what you're saying, or around the sides of what you're saying, and it almost feels like as a pantser who doesn't like the plot, do the characters introduce things that you didn't even see coming? Like you get to a certain juxtaposition, something happens, and the character takes you in a direction you had not even imagined.
Yeah, the characters they're unique themselves, and I did generally discover them. I knew the main character, Slurian. I knew what he was like. I knew his background in my head, and I actually wrote this thing out. I did a Writer's Digest school many years. I was probably about 16, 17 years old. I did that online, a Writer's Digest school, and they showed you how to plan out characters. So he's probably the only character I have ever planned out. And as I'm writing the stories, his characters come and go. Sometimes I know their personalities, sometimes I don't. I introduced Tamara Stoneheart, who's a really stone-faced elf, into the Rika's legacy story, and I knew what she would be like because she was just a no-nonsense character, so I wanted to bring her in. But most of my characters, I discover their personalities as I write them. I have no idea what they're going to be like for the most part, but I try to give each one a little bit different depth to them, just to make them a little bit different from the other ones, a little eclectic, I guess.
Okay. So you'd mentioned that at a certain point there was like this aha moment where about 13 other books just kind of came out of that. Was that so? Because you don't plot,
right?
How much do you write down? So in this book, this happens. Like, is it a sticky note? Is it a piece of paper? How do you kind of you do sort of plan those, don't you?
As I wrote the first series, the Soulforge Saga, as I'm writing the story, some lore came into play and started getting some backstory of some of the characters. And yes, at that point, now it's almost like plotting in reverse because it's stuff that happened before. It's a history. And then I want to expand on the history. So then I write the series before because now I've got all these ideas in my head about what happened before. And I want to write the story that leads into it. So it's almost like I'm writing in reverse. So as Terry Brooks, he's the guy that inspired my love of fantasy, both writing and reading. He's writing actually, I think he's just released the very last book in the Shannara series. And he's kind of gone back and forth, but he generally wrote a chronological timeline that went forward. Whereas my timeline seems to go, it's like Star Wars, it's going backwards all the time. Went from New Hope to the Phantom Menace to Rogue One. That's what I'm doing. Yeah, it's just as I start getting more lore built up in the story, I try not to info dump people and bore them to death with the backstory, but I've got it in my head now, and then I'll put it on an Excel spreadsheet. And yeah, so
that's how you track the. Okay.
No, sorry, I didn't really have I only had the idea for those 3 books probably for 35 years. I had no idea for any other book until the dragon came into the story, and then all of a sudden everything just jumped out from there.
Okay, that is kind of cool. So when you talk about you've got this series and that series, are they all part of the greater universe?
Every book is part of the Soulforge universe. That's correct.
Okay.
I generally write them in trilogies, and so they're standalone trilogies. So you can meet all these characters in book 1, and you are divested with the characters by the time the end of book 3 is. I wrap up the whole storyline. You generally won't see those characters again. And if it's a story that happened before, as I go forward, there might be mention of it. Right. There's mention in the Soulforge Saga of Rika, and she's the main character in the Legends of the Lurker series. But other than that, you start book 1, you get a bunch of characters, you end them at book 3, you never see them again.
Okay, but they're interrelated and they're in the same universe. So are there crossover like little Easter eggs for fans?
I don't know about Easter eggs. I do put in our Monty Pythonisms. It's not unrelated, but
well, those are fun on their own.
Yeah, the kids and I love those little things. So there's always shrubbery and there's a flesh wound and stuff like that in there. And I do that. A couple of my beta readers are family members, and they love finding these things when I do that. So I think that's why I do it. It's more for my beta readers than the readers. But as far as no, there's not a lot. It's just that when I mentioned some backstory, if you read the story before that, you'll see where that came from. But
Okay, cool. That is really, really cool. Can we talk a little bit about your writing process? Because you mentioned beta readers, and we want to talk about how does the process go? Obviously, you don't outline; you have beta readers, and I know you and I were chatting earlier about critique groups and stuff.
Mhm.
We're curious to get a bit of the background as to the maybe the mechanics of your writing.
Okay, my writing is since I retired in 2017, it's taken on a whole new light, and I've slowly honed it to the point where in the morning, because I'm self-published, I need to look after my marketing, social media, and all that other stuff. I don't really enjoy doing that. I want to write the story. I might be a little strange. I like editing. I don't mind doing that at all. I
Okay.
like the fact that it makes the story tighter. It makes it better. So I enjoy editing, but the marketing stuff. So I get up in the morning and I'll look after the marketing, Amazon ads, and try and fumble my way through those things. And then I will edit what I wrote yesterday. So before COVID, I would generally write 25 to 300 or 3,000 words a day.
Okay.
3,000 words. That was my general goal. I didn't care if I hit it, but uh, since COVID, I'm lucky to get 1,000, 1,500. But I will edit what I wrote yesterday. So I'll write it today, edit it tomorrow. And once I'm done editing that, I'm right at the spot where the story is going to continue. And then I'll have
Okay.
my lunch and I'll start writing in the afternoon. And that is basically my writing process throughout the day.
Okay. So that gets you back into where you were yesterday, so you can kind of
Exactly. Yep.
refine it and then continue on to the next piece.
Yeah, I find it makes it a lot cleaner too because everything's fresh in my head. Like everyone does things differently, and there's no right or wrong. And whatever works for you is perfect. A lot of people, when they're done a story, will put their book on a shelf for 3 months. I can't do that. My brain is like a steel trap; like it's rusted shut. So anything that's in there, I cannot get back at it after a certain amount of time. So if I finish my book right away, as soon as I finish the book, the next day I'm editing from cover to cover because
Okay.
everything's fresh in my head, and that's where I catch the plot holes. Whereas I know I've heard other people, they got to put it on the shelf for 3 months or more to catch their plot holes and stuff like that. But I've got to do it while it's fresh in my mind. So as soon as I'm done a book, I will edit it, then I'll print it, and I'll edit from the print, and I'll do a live read on Facebook, and I'll edit it that way. It goes off to a professional editor in Scotland, and then I have beta readers that read it. And I've only got a few beta readers. Caroline's one of them. She doesn't even like fantasy. And the poor thing, she's the first one to read it, and she's the last one to read it other than myself before it goes live. So it's quite a process. I enjoy the editing part, though.
Okay, that is cool. So how did you find your editor? You said editor in Scotland. You're in Canada.
Yeah, no, the internet's a great thing. Like my initial cover artist is from Italy, and it's all through Facebook groups. Like I didn't know anything.
Oh, really? Facebook groups, like recommendations from friends and.
Yeah, recommendations from Facebook friends. And those are people that I've never met before, and I'll probably never meet. But you just hook up with them online, and you just hope that they know what they're talking about. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But it's trial and error. I've had some editors that I didn't pay as much for, and they did okay, but I got what I paid for, right? So I met an author in Sudbury when I was having trouble setting up the North America Free Trade Act as far as getting paid from Amazon. I needed to know what a tin was. I had no idea what a tin was. So I just put a call out on one of the Facebook groups, and science fiction author David Kelly, never met him before. He said, call me. So he gave me his phone number. And back then you were paying long distance calls. And so I called him, and we were on the phone for about an hour, and he talked me through it. And, we talked about other stuff as well. So I picked up a lot of good contacts through Facebook, and that's where I found my, he recommended this editor in Scotland, and she's been terrific. I used to be a omniscient writer when I was reading books in the 70s, and R.A. Salvatore still writes that way. But I wrote, if you and I were in a conversation, I would see your point of view. You'd be thinking about me, and then you'd be in my head, and I'd be thinking about you. And now people call that head hopping, and I've been told that that's a no-no anymore. So my editor beat that out of me. It was quite a process for her, but I now write third person limited, and she's got that instilled in my brain, and I like it now. Now I'm used to it. I think it gives you more intimate touch with the character, that you have your point of view. Like you can still have point of views from different characters. You just have to have them separated by chapter breaks or whatever. Yeah.
So how important then is that community, whether it's online or in person, to you as a writer?
It was very, especially at the beginning. I think I'm getting a little stronger. I'm starting to find my feet now, where I'm more confident in what I'm doing. but there's always going to be things that I'm unsure of, and it's nice to bounce them off other people that have gone through it as well. Like, so when I asked that about David, he'd gone through that the year before, and he had the same issue, so he could relate with me, and it's nice. And now going forward, since I know all this stuff, now I'm starting to do the same for others, which is kind of nice. So I can get back to them, and it's just pay it forward, and it'll come back to you. So
That is really, really cool. And you had talked about critique groups as well that you participate in.
yeah, you gotta be careful with those. I joined one critique group a few years ago, and when I came out of there, I thought I would just hang up my writing and never do it again. Like, I felt so bad about just the way they tore me apart. And I had the opportunity to join another critique group, and as soon as I was given the opportunity, I said, no, I'm not doing that. But I knew one of the members in it, so I thought I'd go do it, and I went, and I'm glad I did. They're very positive. They point out things that you can improve on. I am not, I'm always open to constructive criticism for sure, but they don't do it destructively; they do it constructively, and there's a big difference in that. And it's a fine line. It could be delicate, because that's our baby. This is the stuff I pour my heart and soul into this thing, and to have someone say, no, I don't like that, or inside you go, why? But you sit back and think, yeah, maybe they're right. So, and that I get that from beta readers too, so I'm getting a thicker skin. But the second critique group I'm in, I find a lot of value out of them. And if not, if nothing else, it's a place where I can hang out with people, with peers, with people that get writing, because we're strange people. Our minds work a little bit differently. We're kind of an eclectic group right there ourselves. So it's nice to be with people that get you. Your tribe, as Craig Martell would say.
Awesome. And yeah, you are members of local groups, as well as, you mentioned Craig Martell from the 20 Books group as well
Right.
as several different online groups. I know you've even participated in these conversations as well, asking questions and leaving comments. So
Yes.
there is value then in both the virtual and in the physical?
Oh, for sure. And especially with the crisis going on now, it's just basically all virtual. But it's just the nice thing about the internet is it allows you to connect with people that you wouldn't generally connect with. Like when I was writing in the 70s and 80s, unless you knew someone in the big five, I didn't even think about trying to publish my stuff. I just thought it was a hobby. It's just something I'd write and I'd read to the kids, and I'd put them to sleep. So I thought at the time maybe I should just sell these things as sleeping aids instead, because but now with the internet, it's great, because now we can publish online, and maybe that's not a good thing all the time, but we publish online, we can talk to people. I've got a cover artist in Singapore who's done a couple of pictures, like you can see behind me. She's done those covers that are coming up, and I've never met her without internet for sure.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm going to bring up a comment actually that was left from Alyssa, because she actually says, I dig the dragon wall behind Richard, very high fantasy chic. And
those are all the interior art. That's all the interior art or covers of my book. So as I get another interior, like I say, I started writing when I read Hardy Boys. In the Hardy Boy books, they had penciled in drawings.
Right.
I always liked pictures in a book. So when I started writing, I figured I got to put pictures in my books too, because a picture tells 1,000 words. I want the reader to experience the character and the vista the way I see it. I can explain it in prose, purple prose for chapter after chapter. You don't want to read that stuff, but if you can see it, it just makes the book and the reading experience that much more intimate for the reader. So I try to incorporate 3 to 5 pictures per book. I wish I could do more, but they're very expensive. The artists are very good at what they do, and they get paid a lot, and they deserve it. But I can't afford right now to put a picture in every chapter. Someday maybe, but not right now.
And was it the same designer, or you must have had somebody design the Souls Forge logo that you're wearing on your chest, which is also on like your imprint and your books?
Yeah, actually, that's just coincidence. That just came from Amazon. That has nothing to do with me. That's just something that came in a costume. But
oh, I thought it was your logo. Okay.
No, it's funny that you said that. I never thought about that until you said that. And it does look like until you see it up close. But no, the logo, I had that designed from my first cover artist. So the first cover artist I employed is the Marco Peniciati. He's from Italy. Does a great job for custom covers. So if you want a custom cover, he's the guy to do it. So I give him a scene. I give him the character description, the clothing and stuff like that. And when he gave me that first cover back for Soul Forge, I swear he like drew it right out of my head. It was just amazing. And so I got him to do my first 5 covers. And when I got to the point where that character did something crazy in Into the Madness, book 3, and the dragon had to come in, that's when the inspiration, all of a sudden I thought about, okay, I got to have a dragon. I got to explain this. I get my best thinking in the shower, and that's where I thought about it. And I had someplace to go that day. So I come out of the shower, I got dressed. I had 5 minutes to kill before I should get in the truck. And I sat in front of the computer, and there was a pre-made cover of Rika's Flight. And I had never met the artist before, the designer, never saw the picture before, but right away, that's it. That's Rika, and that's the dragon. So I was late for wherever I was. I don't remember where I was going, but I was late getting there because I had to make sure I secured that cover before she sold it. And
so that character, that story was actually inspired by the original art that you purchased for the cover.
That story was inspired. That story was inspired because of the character doing something silly in the middle of.
Oh, I see. Oh, but you saw the art, and it actually meshed with what you already had in mind.
It meshed with what I was thinking in the shower about 5 minutes before that. It was just so ironic. Like I can't explain it. It just came out. Wow, that's it.
That is so cool. I guess having more showers is probably the answer. If writers are looking for
my best thing in the shower,
yeah, secret magic bullet is having more showers, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Maybe you get discovered as a singer. Maybe you have a brilliant idea for a novel.
Not never a singer, no.
So I want to get into again, back to the dress, back to your garb, back to in-person events. Before we get into that, I'm going to share a couple pictures that I got you to share with me because I wanted people who are watching this to view. So this is a trailer with original artwork on it. This is the back of the trailer. And then this is just a picture of the side of the trailer for one of your forthcoming titles. You actually invested in getting, obviously, a high enough resolution artwork for the trailer. Why? Why would you spend that kind of money on something like that? Aren't you a digital only kind of guy?
No, I'm digital and print. I love doing shows, and we were just talking. My wife and I were just talking about this the other day. We so miss going out to the shows. Like I'm introverted. I don't normally do well with a bunch of people. I'm the wallflower at a party and stuff like that. But the book shows, I really enjoy it because they, again, they're my tribe, and they come out and obviously they're interested in what I'm doing, so I get to tell them all about my books. But we really enjoy doing these shows, and we needed a trailer because we had a flatbed trailer, and our daughter Lauren is now writing books as well, so she's going to these shows as well. So we don't have room in our SUV to carry all our stuff. So I figured we'd get a trailer, and then we wanted a covered trailer because books are books; they don't like water. And then Caroline had the idea of, well, if we're going to pull around the trailer with walls on it, let's advertise on it. And they're just covers. They're 300 DPI. That's all they are. And we were a little skeptical whether they'd pixelate as they got bigger, but they didn't. The quality is amazing. Like this, you need to see the trailer up front. Somebody will show it to you up in real. It's amazing. The detail on there it's just incredible. And it's all 300 DPI.
So you went and bought a trailer that you needed, and then how did you get the artwork transferred onto the trailer?
Caroline designed how it would look on the trailer.
Okay.
I worked with the cover artists. They moved some of the titles around or gave us license to do that. They give us just individual files with the titles so we can move them around to fit around the wheel well and stuff like that. And then we went to a graphics place in Kitchener, and they took it from there, and they worked with us, and they showed us how it would look, and we moved a couple things around, and they put it on. They did a great job.
Oh, that is fantastic. And that's for when you're back at the in-person events. So how many, I've seen you at a number of events locally here in the Waterloo region, as well as Sudbury. How many events were you doing in a typical year?
It's tough to say. Lots. I tried to do them every couple of weeks throughout the spring, summer, and fall. And we're trying to get into Christmas markets. The thing was trying to find the events that work for me. So different authors, like Romancing the Falls is not probably a good place for a fantasy author. And so I do Comic Cons, and Comic Cons are hit and miss. People aren't there per se to buy books, but you'll find some people that buy books, and it makes it worth your while. I stumbled across the medieval fair in Fergus last year, about 2 weeks before it started. And I figured, I'll try that. I just figured it says medieval. I thought they'd be purists, like they wouldn't want magic and dragons. So I never thought about going there. And we applied 2 weeks before, and they squeezed us in. And halfway through the event, I looked at Caroline and said, "We're going to sell out." I had never sold out before. And sure enough, we were sold out long before the event ended. And I actually was taking orders and driving the books to people
Oh my
after the
God.
fact. Yeah. So
Wow, that is awesome.
so I found my crowd, and so then I went to the Waterloo Medieval Fair, and so now we're trying to find these Renaissance festivals and stuff like that. And we looked in Michigan and New York State. That's another nut that we have to crack, because we have to figure out the IRS part of it, and cross-border sales and stuff like that. We're getting there, and hopefully I can do the cons in the States next year, because like in Canada, you might get 2,500 to 5,000 people. In the States, you get 25,000 or more people go through there. So the market's just so much bigger down there.
Yeah, although on the flip side, I do know, because we were both at Graphicon in Sudbury, Ontario. We were actually had tables beside one another,
Yeah.
and neighbors here in town, but we drive 6 hours away to be neighbors again. But what I found is sometimes even the smaller cons. Yeah, I mean, when I had done Niagara Falls, a Comic-Con, which is huge, I think they had 30,000, 40,000 people.
Oh, wow.
It was such a huge event, and so many aisles and tables that not everyone went by the aisle, where at least I remember my first year in Sudbury, all 4,000 people see you because there's only 3 aisles or 4 aisles, right? So it's like a little different sort of exposure thing going on there too.
Yeah, well, we find that in Chatham. There's another place in Chatham, Ontario, that people unfamiliar with the geography, that Sudbury and Chatham are kind of isolated from everywhere else. They're big urban centers, but there's nothing around them. So that, if Toronto has something going on, there's so many things going on in Toronto. People spend their bucks forever. But when Sudbury or Chatham puts on an event, everybody in Sudbury or Chatham goes.
Yeah.
So even though it's not a big venue, you've got everybody that goes. There's nothing else to do in those places. So I did Chatham, and I pretty well sold out as well, just because it was Chatham. There's nothing else around it for hours.
That is so cool. So you talked about being an introvert, and you're in the costume, which is awesome. And at the booth, you're in the costume. Does the costume help you get into character as a salesperson, or it eases the people, like they see you and they go, okay, dude doesn't write horror, dude probably doesn't write fantasy romance, but he writes epic fantasy most likely based on his garb.
It certainly pulled people in, just because they've seen me in costume and they think it's neat. When I first did, like I say, I'm very shy, so I'm not one to throw myself out there, and I was very reluctant to put the costume on at the beginning, because that's just the way I am. But I got used to it after a couple of times. Now I don't mind at all. I put it on anywhere I walk down the street. But
Awesome.
I'm still very introverted. I don't like being the center of attention. But as far as book shows and stuff, they appreciate it, and the fans, they like to buy the book and then they get a picture taken. They want to get the picture taken with the knight, and they think that's really cool. So it's a nice way to give back to the fans. So.
Oh, that is really, really cool. Now, speaking of giving back, the other thing this sticks in my mind as evidence of true professionalism and true empathy and true kindness and generosity is you and Caroline were at the event in Sudbury, and we were there. And the rush at the end of the day, because this was just a single day event, and everyone's packing up, and you got to get it, on the highway and all the stuff, and all of that organization. But you guys took the time not only to speak to as many of the volunteers as possible and personally thank them, but then you also left notes for the volunteers who were cleaning up the tables and the chairs, because they may not even be the same people that you saw during the show. And I remember thinking, wow, these guys really care and are really invested in the people who make these things happen. And that just spoke, in my mind, that spoke huge volumes about your professionalism and stuff. So tell me a little bit about that. Why do you bother?
Well, I don't know. We've always been like that. That note itself that day was Caroline's idea, but I've always gone out of my way to thank, no one's better than anyone else. And without them, we're not having a show. I appreciate what they've done. Like, they work so many hours behind the scenes. They enjoy it. I'm sure they do, but they're slugging it out, and they're doing that for my benefit. And, without them, I can't do what I do. So I just totally appreciate it. I think, again, we can tie this into COVID now, is there's so much that all of a sudden we're appreciating all these frontline workers that, not just your nurses and stuff like that, but your grocery store clerks and all the other people that are keeping us going while the world's falling apart around us. And, they don't get the thanks that they deserve. life's so busy, we don't think about it. I don't think it's a conscious thought not to appreciate them, but you just don't, because that's the way life is. So we'd like to take the time and just say thank you to everybody who helps us out. But always floors me that people ask me, "Can I have your autograph on your book?" And I'll ask them, "Can I sign the book for you?" And I say, "How much?" And that just floors me. I would never sign or never charge to sign a book. Never charge them my picture taken. These fans are the ones that are, buttering my bread. They're buying my books. Why would I charge them to do that? That doesn't make any sense. I know if people do it for charity and stuff like that, that's great, but it's just a question that floors me. And I think we need to just slow down and look around and just thank everybody.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Thank you for that. We are now at the segment of the show where we're going to take some of the questions that people have been dropping into the comments. And so, first question is Charles asks. He says hello. He says hello and then asks, "Did the genre itself get your attention, or did you do some marketing?"
Like I say, when I first started writing, I wrote The Hardy Boys, and then I jumped into World War II fiction, where people are taking over Japan. The U.S. forces were taking over Japan, so I did all the research on that. Star Wars came out, and I just wanted to write science fiction. And all these stories I wrote with my friends and me. We were all the main characters in my science fiction one. We flew spaceships around the galaxy, and we saved the galaxy.
Were you Luke Skywalker or Han Solo?
Nah, I was probably Luke, I guess. I wasn't the outgoing one. My best friend would be Han Solo for sure, the one that the girls liked. Yeah, not me. But yeah, so fantasy. It was only because that proprietor at the local bookstore in downtown Galt. I guess it wouldn't have been Galt. It would have been Cambridge at that point. But in downtown Cambridge, introduced me to Terry Brooks, and just a switch went off, and I loved fantasy, so I started reading fantasy. And then, like I say, there was that music from Iron Maiden Run to the Hills is not about fantasy. It's about the Native Indians. But for some reason, it just sparked this story in my head. And I went from there. So I didn't put any thought into genre, and like I say, I don't write to market. I am now because I'm introduced to dragons, but that wasn't a conscious thought. I wasn't thinking, okay, I got to write to market. I'm just writing what I love, and dragons just happen to come into it.
Oh, that is cool. Well, thank you.
I don't know if that answered that question or not, but
yeah, I think it did, and that's great. And it's funny because I remember discovering, was it the Elfstones of Shannara? Was that the first big Brooks novel, or was it
Sword of Shannara was number 1?
Sword.
Elfstones was number 2, yes, and then
Okay.
Wish Song, yeah.
Yeah, because those were just giant. I just sunk my teeth into those and really adored those. And that I enjoyed them. But then you went off and started writing fantasy from there.
Yes, yeah, they inspired my love of fantasy, and it was the Run to the Hills song by Iron Maiden. No, that just made me want to write fantasy. Up to that point, I hadn't written fantasy. I don't know why.
Iron Maiden. So were there any other songs that you? So for example, for when I was dabbling in writing fantasy, there was a Rush song, Rivendell. Always made me think, because I think it kind of makes me think of Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. Are there other songs? What's that?
Xanadu from Rush does that for me.
Oh yeah, of course. Okay.
And the Trees. I don't know why the Trees. I know it's kind of a political song, but the Trees does as well. And, the lyrics in Rush are amazing. I write to heavy metal. I write to alternative music. I write to sad epic music, depending on the scene. I've got a huge playlist now on my media's player. And whenever I'm writing, if I'm writing a sad scene, I'll get the sad epic music. If I'm writing a fight scene, I'll have some very hard rock with wicked drum beats and big guitar going just to get my fingers typing faster. And it just sets the mood. I definitely always write with music blaring in my ears.
Awesome. Very cool. I love to hear how writers write. I'm going to take the next question that I see here is Lambert asks, it says, what advice can you give to aspiring authors?
Write it. Take the time and write it. It's, you're only as good as the book that you're writing.
Okay.
So don't sweat. I'm not J.K. Rowling. I'm not Stephen King. I'm not Mark Lefebvre, because we don't need any more of those. The world already has one. Right? We don't need 18 Stephen Kings. We only need one, but we need a Lambert. The world hasn't got one of those yet. So just be yourself and write the book and feel confident in the book that you're writing. The best book that you're going to write is the one that's on your computer screen. It's going to be better than the one you write before, hopefully. As a writer, we should evolve. So Soulforge, although it's my baby, it's probably my worst book. I enjoy it. I'm not saying it's a bad book, but I can see the progression that each book I wrote just slowly gets better. The narrative gets tighter, getting rid of my ly words and all that other editing stuff. And so, and I don't have to run on sentences, and punctuation is getting better. Editors are good for that too. But the book that I'm writing is always my best book. So for Lambert, just write it. If you don't write it, we can't read it.
Great advice. Thank you for that. Now, this kind of ties into what we were talking about, but Sir Irwin asks, how do you stimulate your imagination? Do you listen to classical music, for example, or daydream? So apart from the music we talked about, what else do you do to stimulate your imagination?
I do listen to classical music, not as a rule. I'm like you. I'm a Rush fan. It's probably my favorite band. I'm not trying to butter you up, but I'm also a big Black Sabbath fan. Anything the old 70s, 80s heavy metal. But I like all kinds of music. I'm not a huge country fan, and not a huge rap fan. That's just not my style. But anything else I'll listen to, and it depends on the mood that I'm in. It depends on the mood of the story at the time, and it will reflect on what I'm listening to. So I don't listen to a lot of classical music per se, but there's a lot of classical music that gets tied into these epic music scores that we see now on YouTube and stuff like that. And they incorporate around Beethoven or stuff like that, and then they expand upon it. They add electric to it and everything else. So yeah, I don't know if that's answering that question properly or not either. But I don't specifically go out and find a genre of music. I just generally have a playlist that goes on all the time.
Okay, that's cool. I like that. Joshua comments on something you said earlier. Said, "Oh man, you have to be careful about choosing critique groups. What's some advice you can give on having found a good one and having found one that was maybe not so good?"
Yeah, unfortunately, I guess you just have to go out and experience them once. Like, don't be shy. Go out there and just put your best foot forward. And if it's for you, great. If it's not for you, that's fine too. Like that first one that I experienced. I knew right away that I never want to come back here again. And one, I didn't think I was going to be writing anymore after that. I was just like, seriously,
Right.
they just trashed me. And I said, wow, what am I doing here? Like, why am I even wasting my time doing this? It should just be a hobby and never see the light of day. But thankfully it didn't happen. And I kept going. And this other critique group is very supportive. And, I think they make sure that they're supportive. But
Right.
it's all in the mindset. You can point out to me that I don't like the way you worded that, or that's passive voice and whatever, and that's fine. But right away they'll throw a positive in there as well. So it's all we're all human. We all have feelings, and as writers we get our feelings crushed when people say, "Well, I didn't like that about your story." What do you mean you didn't like that about a story? You know how many times I've edited that? But if you can take the constructive criticism and it's delivered well, then that's a critique group for you. So that critique group that I originally went to might have been good for them, but it wasn't good for me. So you just got to take the chance, go there, do a meeting or two. I would suggest probably two. I didn't give the other group another chance, but just to feel them out a bit more. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Other question from Lambert is, how do you write when you're not feeling creative at the moment?
That's tough. Like I say, because I edit what I did yesterday, it just kind of puts me in the frame of mind that I need to be for that scene.
Yeah.
But if I can't get anything from that, I'll just write the word "the," and then I'll write the next word, and then I'll write the next word. And sometimes the session is pretty plotting. You're just gonna go through the motions. But a lot of times that'll all of a sudden spur something, and then away you go again. So. And then I'll come to a dead end for some reason. All of a sudden, I'll hard stop, and I can't get going again. But then you got to take a break, come back to the computer screen, write the word "the" again, and the words will follow. And then that's what editing's for too. So if you're having a bad writing session, you're gonna have lots of editing sessions, and you can throw that stuff out. You can hone it. You can expand it, whatever you want. But just write the word "the."
Cool. Awesome. Could start with something, right? I also heard a really brilliant writer from Cambridge, Ontario say, a shower sometimes helps too. Wasn't that long ago?
Yes, well, exactly. Yeah. Go for a walk. I go for a walk. Caroline, I'll go for a walk during the day. We both work from home in the same office. We haven't killed each other yet. But we'll go for a walk midday, either before lunch or after. And, a lot of times you're just looking around, and I'll get a thought in my head. I got to rush home now because now I know what I want to write, even though I didn't know what I wanted to write 5 minutes before that. So.
Cool. Okay. Charles asks, he said, you mentioned Amazon ads. Any tips to share?
Pay someone to do it for you. I wish I actually, sorry, I wish I could actually find someone I could pay to do it for me, because if they could make $1,000 and I gave them 500 to do it, I would be glad to do it. Amazon ads, there's a bunch of brilliant resources out there. If you're not with 20 books to 50K, that would be a good group to start with. They've taught me a lot, and there's some free. Brian Cohen is another one who's a member of that group, and he does some free Amazon ad courses. And they're just introductory courses. They're not going to give you the meat and bones, but they get you going. And they're actually, once you get going, they're not tough, they're not expensive, and it'll help you sink your teeth into the ad part of it. Amazon ads are such a tricky thing. What works for Mark won't work for me. What works for me is not going to work for Mark. So you got to find your own way through it. I am not an expert whatsoever in ads. If I was, my wife would be retired already. So we're just getting into Facebook ads now, and they're so daunting. I'm not sure why they make these things so difficult. In my mind, like, if you're running this Facebook or Amazon, make it easy. And then I'm going to spend my money on your ads to try and get them to work. But I look at the Facebook ads and I don't want nothing to do with them. And a lot of people make a lot of money off Facebook, but I haven't figured it out yet. And that's a part of writing I don't enjoy. So as an independent author, that's the hat that I least like to wear.
Cool. Awesome. Just a quick comment from Deb says, no question, just a hello to you both. Great interview. Thank you for that, Deb. But you'd mentioned working with your wife, and you're both working in the home, and you were doing that before COVID-19.
Yes.
So how does that work out? Do you have separate offices? I mean, you obviously have all the dragon pictures behind you from the covers and all the artwork and stuff like that. Is she sitting across from you with a wall of her stuff behind, or are you in separate rooms? How do you do that?
Yeah, we're in the same office. We converted. It used to be the master bedroom. It's no longer. But we have 3 desks in here and a table, and that's what I'm sitting at right now. So the pictures behind me are beside my desk, and then Caroline is right on the other side of me. So if you were to look forward from where I'm looking, I guess Caroline's over there right now working away. She's got about 18 computer screens over there, and she's got a stand-up desk and everything else. But we get along well. She doesn't face me, so maybe that's good for her. She looks out the window, and I kind of look at my pictures and stuff like that. But it's good. It's like she's very focused on what she does, and I'm very focused on what I do. I put my headphones on, and we don't even know each other's in the office for the most part until we'll get up, and one of us will encourage the other one to get up and stretch and move our legs. Sometimes we'll be at the desk from 7:30 in the morning until like 8 o'clock at night. We get up for lunches and stuff like that. But it can be a long haul in here. We get along quite well. Some people say, "Oh, I couldn't do that," but it works out quite well. We leave each other alone, and we just get the job done. So
cool. And you also, I mean, you travel together to go to a lot of these conferences and cons and stuff like that. So you've got someone, so you can run to the washroom at least.
No, she's a great support. Yeah, no, she helps me set up. She helps me tear down. A lot of times, if she'll set my table up the way she thinks it looks better to draw people in, and I normally let her do that because women. I'm not stereotyping, but women are better at doing stuff like that than guys. Like guys just throw the stuff in a pile and here, come buy this. But she has it all laid out nicely. So we work well together. So she's trying to start looking after my marketing, which would be great if she can get that going properly, and I can just say it's all yours.
The person you can hire is right across the office from you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes, and she charges me a good rate too.
Yeah, I'm sure she would. Excellent. So we're getting close to the end of the broadcast. A couple things. Is there anything? Because remember that 35 years that it took you before you got to the point where everything just kind of hit and clicked, and then you started to do it full time. What sort of advice, looking back, would you go back and tell the younger Richard who discovered Terry Brooks and loved those fantasies and dreamed of writing them? What sort of advice would you go back and tell him?
I would tell him to eke out time for himself. And I had 5 kids and 2 careers, and the kids and the careers always came first. And that's what Rika's Flight is all about. It's following her dreams, and that's what Caroline's been allowed me to do it. And when I was working for the police service, this is the epiphany for me. Is I pulled up to a house, and before I went to knock on the door, the first thing I do is I check out male or female. Again, not stereotyping, but you get a big male, you might have more trouble. I realized it was a female, and she was. I looked at her date of birth, and the date of birth put her at 70. So I figured, okay, well, there shouldn't be any stress going in the house. You never know what's behind the door. But so I said, she's 70. And I looked at that piece of paper in my hand and going, 70. I was there to deliver, I think I was delivering a summons or something, but I'm thinking 70, that's like 11 years for me. 11? And no, that was 19 years. 19 years for me, I'd be 70. And it was the epiphany. I'm thinking, I'm going to look back 19 years from now and say, I should have done it. Like, we don't get, this isn't a dress rehearsal. We don't get to do it again. We don't get to come back and say, I should have done this when I was 20 and should have done this when I was 30. You only get to do it once. And so I'll never get to do this again. So I figured, well, I went home that night and I said to Caroline, and we discussed it, that I'm going to resign from the police service and follow my dream. And it just, and luckily for us, we were financially in a position that we could do that. There's so many different factors that weigh into these decisions, but we're taking a chance. I no longer have benefits, and I have, I have heart issues and stuff like that. So there's healthcare stuff that we got to worry about. But like I say, I don't get to come back and do this again and say, when I come back, I'm going to do it this way. There's no dress rehearsal. We're on the stage now, so it's time to perform, and that's what we're doing.
Awesome. Great words to leave us with. Richard, please let people know where they can find you online.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook, Richard H. Stevens. My website's there, www.richardhstevens.com. I sell books out of my house. I have people that come on from all over the province. When I release a book, they'll pick them up from my door. And I'm on Amazon as well. I'm going to be going wide at some point in the near future. I'm now that I've got all the bugs and stuff out of the books, it doesn't matter how many times you look at your book, there's always that typo that gets through. I think I've got them all fleshed out now, and I'm ready to go on Ingram Spark. And so I'm going to get them down in the States, and hopefully we'll get them into some bookstores in the States at that point. So we're growing momentum. Like every month I see a bit more. So it's coming. And every time I write a book, the book that you write and publish sells the last book. So
awesome.
That's another advice for the writers is just write the next book. It'll sell the last one.
Awesome. Well, Richard, thanks so much for hanging out with me this afternoon.
I appreciate it.